Why did you kick me out of the taxi just for asking questions about the route? I just wanted to know why you were taking such a long detour.
And talking too loudly.
Talking? I wasn't yelling at you. I was trying to figure out why we were going in circles.
It's my taxi, and I can refuse to take someone if they make me feel uncomfortable.
Uncomfortable? I'm just asking questions.
The rain had been coming down in sheets all day, washing the grime from the city streets, but doing little to cleanse the deeper stains of prejudice. On this particular evening, under the glow of flickering neon signs, a routine act of urban transit was about to expose an ugly truth about power, perception, and the persistent specter of bias. This is the story of a journey that should have been unremarkable, but instead became a flashpoint, illuminating the everyday indignities faced by those simply trying to navigate their lives. At the center of the storm was Miles Corbin, a taxi driver whose record was already a testament to a troubling pattern of behavior. 11 complaints, 11 separate instances logged with the city's Taxi and Limousine Commission, detailing everything from verbal abuse to outright refusal of service. For many, a single complaint might be an anomaly, a misunderstanding. But for Corbin, 11 complaints painted a clear picture of a man operating on the razor's edge of acceptable conduct, a man whose authority, however minor, was frequently wielded as a weapon. His passenger that night was Dr. Eris Thorne, a man whose credentials commanded respect in virtually any other sphere. A distinguished urban planner, a tenured professor at one of the nation's most prestigious universities, and a voice of reason in complex civic debates. Yet, on this night, in the backseat of Miles Corbin's cab, Dr. Thorne was reduced to just another black man, his intellect, his achievements, his very humanity, dismissed with an alarming ease. How could a man of such standing be treated with such flagrant disrespect, simply for asking a question? The answer, as we will uncover, lies deep within the unchecked biases that continue to plague our systems. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop a comment below and let us know. Your engagement helps us bring these critical stories to light. The city of Washington, D.C., perpetually buzzing with the machinery of government and the pulse of academic life, felt particularly somber on that Tuesday evening. A chill late autumn rain slicked the avenues, reflecting the hurried dance of headlights and tail lamps. The air hung heavy with the scent of wet asphalt and exhaust, a familiar urban perfume that Dr. Eris Thorne had come to know intimately over his 2 decades in the capital. It was just past 9:30 p.m., the kind of hour when the city's energy begins to wane, and the comfort of a warm home feels like an urgent necessity. Dr. Thorne had just concluded a late-night seminar at Georgetown University, a deep dive into sustainable urban development strategies. He was tired, but the intellectual stimulation of engaging with his graduate students always left him with a quiet satisfaction. A Guggenheim Fellow, Dr. Thorne held a Ph.D. in urban studies from the University of California, Berkeley, and had authored 3 seminal books on equitable city planning. His work had influenced policy in major metropolitan areas across the globe, and he was frequently sought after as a speaker and consultant. He was, by any measure, a man who had not only earned his position, but had profoundly shaped his field. He was a pillar of his community, a mentor, an innovator. Yet, none of these accolades, none of his achievements, would matter in the confines of a yellow cab on a rainy D.C. night. Miles Corbin, on the other hand, had built a reputation of a different kind. His name was whispered among dispatchers and occasionally surfaced in the internal memos of the Taxi and Limousine Commission. His complaint file, thick with documented grievances, painted a disturbing portrait of a driver whose temperament often overshadowed his professional duties. In 2018, just 2 years after receiving his license, Corbin faced his first serious complaint. He had refused service to a visually impaired passenger, Ms. Eleanor Vance, who was accompanied by her certified service animal, a golden retriever named Buddy. Corbin claimed a severe allergy, despite regulations requiring drivers to accommodate service animals. The incident led to a temporary suspension, but he was back on the road within weeks, his explanation accepted by a lenient review board. 2 years later, in the spring of 2020, Corbin was again under scrutiny. This time, it involved an elderly passenger, Mr. Arthur Jenkins, who simply questioned Corbin's chosen route to the National Mall. Mr. Jenkins, a lifelong resident of D.C., suggested a faster alternative, prompting Corbin to launch into a verbal tirade, accusing the passenger of attempting to backseat drive and insulting his intelligence. The argument escalated to the point where Mr. Jenkins, shaken and distressed, demanded to be let out several blocks from his destination. Corbin received a formal warning, but no further action was taken. Then, in the summer of 2022, a more egregious incident occurred. Corbin falsely reported a tourist couple, the Millers, for non-payment after he had demanded an off-meter fare, an illegal practice. When the Millers refused, insisting on a metered rate, Corbin pulled over, threatened to call the police, and then, after they reluctantly paid the inflated sum, he still filed a fraudulent report. It took weeks for the Millers to clear their names, and while Corbin was fined, his license remained active. The pattern was clear. Miles Corbin harbored a deep-seated contempt for passengers who asserted their rights, questioned his authority, or simply existed in a way that challenged his preconceived notions. His history was not just a series of isolated incidents. It was a trajectory of escalating disrespect, culminating in the events of that rainy D.C. evening. Dr. Thorne, seeking refuge from persistent drizzle, hailed Corbin's cab outside the university gates. The yellow vehicle pulled to the curb with a hiss of wet tires. Dr. Thorne confirmed his destination, a quiet residential street in Cleveland Park, and then, as was his habit, politely inquired about the estimated fare and the quickest route, mentioning the notorious rush-hour traffic that often snaked through DuPont Circle. It was a mundane, legitimate question, born of efficiency and a desire to avoid unnecessary delays. He wasn't challenging Corbin. He was simply engaging in the kind of reasonable inquiry that any paying customer might make of a service provider. But in Miles Corbin's mind, the question was not mundane. It was an affront. It was a challenge to his perceived authority, a subtle insubordination from a passenger he had already, perhaps subconsciously, categorized. The call wasn't from dispatch. It was an internal siren of bias blaring in Corbin's own mind, an automatic trigger that transformed a simple question into a perceived threat. The initial exchange was rapid fire, almost imperceptible in its escalation. "Cleveland Park, please," Dr. Thorne stated, settling into the back seat. "All right," Corbin grunted, pulling away from the curb. "Could you take Wisconsin Avenue, please?" "I find it's usually quicker this time of night. Avoids a DuPont gridlock," Dr. Thorne offered, his tone neutral, conversational. Corbin's knuckles tightened on the steering wheel. He glanced into the rear-view mirror, his eyes narrowing. "I know how to get to Cleveland Park. I don't need your directions." His voice was laced with an immediate defensive edge. Dr. Thorne, surprised by the abrupt hostility, attempted to de-escalate. "Of course, I just thought with the rain. Traffic might be heavier than usual. It's simply a suggestion." "A suggestion? Or are you telling me how to do my job?" Corbin snapped, his voice rising, the politeness entirely absent. "I've been driving this city for 15 years. I don't need some backseat driver telling me what to do." "Sir, I'm simply a passenger asking about the route," Dr. Thorne replied, his own patience beginning to fray, but maintaining a calm, measured tone. "If you prefer, I can just confirm the estimated fare then." "The fare is what the meter says it is." "What are you, trying to argue about the price before we even get there?" Corbin accused, his face reddening. He was now actively looking at Dr. Thorne, in the rear-view mirror, not the road. "No, I am not arguing about the price. I am asking for an estimate, which is standard practice," Dr. Thorne said, his voice now firm. "I believe I have the right to ask questions about the service I'm paying for." Corbin scoffed, a dismissive sound. "Right to ask questions? Anyone can fake that. Anyone can pretend to be concerned about the route just to cause trouble." He pulled the cab sharply to the right, onto a side street, far from the main thoroughfare. "You know what? I don't need this. Get out. Get out of my cab right now." Dr. Thorne was stunned. "Excuse me? You cannot just eject a paying passenger in the middle of a street, sir. This is illegal. I can do whatever I want in my cab. This is my vehicle, and I'm telling you to get out." Corbin yelled, slamming on the brakes. The cab lurched to a halt in front of a dimly lit storefront. "Get out, or I'm calling the police for harassment." By this point, the sudden stop and the raised voices had attracted attention. A few pedestrians, caught under the awnings of closed shops, turned to watch. One person, a young woman holding an umbrella, pulled out her phone and began recording. "I am not harassing you. I am asking for your license number, as I intend to report this incident," Dr. Thorne stated, reaching for his phone. "You're not getting anything from me. Get out." Corbin unbuckled his seatbelt, half turning his seat, his posture menacing. It was at this critical juncture, just as the confrontation threatened to boil over into physical altercation, that a black sedan with the distinctive markings of the D.C. taxi and limousine commission pulled up sharply behind Corbin's cab. A supervisor, Ms. Brenda Hayes, had been alerted by a quick-thinking dispatcher who had overheard the escalating argument on Corbin's open radio channel. Hayes, a no-nonsense veteran of the commission, wasted no time. She stepped out of her vehicle, her expression grim, and approached the taxi. "Driver Corbin, step out of the vehicle. License and registration now," she commanded, her voice cutting through the tension. "And Dr. Thorne, are you all right?" The immediate intervention of Supervisor Hayes was critical. Miles Corbin, visibly deflated by the unexpected arrival of authority, slowly exited his cab, his bravado instantly evaporating. Dr. Thorne, still shaken but composed, confirmed his identity and recounted the events, pointing to the now recording bystander as a witness. Hayes quickly secured Corbin's taxi license and identification, instructing him to remain by his vehicle. The scene, which moments before had been charged with hostility, now settled into the cold, official reality of an investigation. Corbin's badge and weapon, his taxi, was now effectively impounded, its operation suspended pending a full review. The immediate resolution was swift and decisive. Supervisor Hayes arranged for another taxi to pick up Dr. Thorne, ensuring his safe passage home. Corbin's cab was impounded on the spot, his license confiscated, and he was informed he would be facing an immediate review by the Taxi and Limousine Commission. The formal process had begun, but the true impact of the incident was just starting to unfold. Should officers, or in this case, service providers like taxi drivers, who illegally eject passengers or engage in discriminatory behavior, face automatic termination or permanent license revocation? This is not merely a question of discipline. It's a question of public trust and safety. Within hours, the bystander video, captured by Ms. Maya Rodriguez, a Georgetown student, exploded across social media platforms. Posted initially to TikTok and X, it quickly garnered millions of views. The hashtags #JusticeForThorne, #TaxiBias, and #DCYellowCab began trending nationally. The raw footage, showing Corbin's aggressive demeanor and Dr. Thorne's calm, dignified response, resonated deeply with an audience all too familiar with similar experiences of racial profiling and everyday discrimination. News outlets picked up the story, featuring interviews with Dr. Thorne and Ms. Rodriguez, amplifying the outrage. The narrative was undeniable. A celebrated black academic, treated as a second-class citizen for the unforgivable sin of asking a question. The institutional responses were swift, pressured by the public outcry. Dr. Thorne, with the support of the ACLU and a prominent civil rights law firm, filed a comprehensive civil rights lawsuit against Miles Corbin personally and against the taxi company, Capital City Cabs, for negligent hiring, supervision, and racial discrimination. The lawsuit detailed claims of false imprisonment, emotional distress, and violation of civil rights under D.C. law. The Taxi and Limousine Commission launched an expedited, high-profile investigation, reviewing Corbin's extensive complaint history, which now seemed glaringly indicative of a systemic problem. Faced with overwhelming public condemnation, irrefutable video evidence, and the threat of a protracted legal battle that could severely damage its reputation and financial standing, Capital City Cabs moved quickly to settle. Within 2 months, Dr. Thorne was awarded a settlement of $1.2 million. It was, at the time, the largest settlement in the city's history for a case involving passenger mistreatment and discrimination by a taxi driver. The settlement sent a clear message. This kind of behavior would no longer be tolerated, and the financial consequences for negligence would be severe. Miles Corbin's professional career ended abruptly. Following the Commission's investigation, which corroborated Dr. Thorne's account and reviewed Corbin's extensive history of complaints, his taxi driver's license was suspended indefinitely, effectively leading to his permanent termination from the industry. The official termination letter, publicly released by the Commission, stated, Mr. Corbin has demonstrated a flagrant disregard for passengers' safety and civil rights, exhibiting a pattern of unprofessional and discriminatory conduct that renders him unfit to hold a public-facing service license. His actions not only violated multiple commission regulations, but also severely undermined the public's trust in our transportation system. The process of decertification, the permanent revocation of his ability to operate a taxi, was initiated without delay. In the wake of the settlement and Corbin's professional downfall, Dr. Aris Thorne delivered a powerful, poignant testimony before the D.C. City Council, his voice resonating with a quiet authority that commanded attention. "If this can happen to me," he began, his gaze sweeping across the chamber, "a tenured professor, a recognized scholar, a man with professional standing that should, in theory, offer a degree of protection, simply for asking a clarifying question about a route, then what hope is there for others? What hope is there for the young student, the elderly citizen, the working parent, or anyone simply trying to get home without facing humiliation, disrespect, or outright discrimination?" His words hung in the air, a stark reminder that privilege and position offer no absolute shield against the pervasive forces of prejudice. He continued, "My experience, while painful, is not unique. It is a microcosm of countless daily indignities faced by black and brown individuals across this nation, often in spaces where they are most vulnerable, in transit, in commerce, in public life. This incident was not just about a rude taxi driver. It was about the insidious nature of implicit bias, unchecked power, and a system that allowed a pattern of egregious behavior to persist for far too long. Should incidents like this, which clearly demonstrate a pattern of discriminatory behavior by a licensed service provider, trigger a comprehensive federal investigation into the enforcement of anti-discrimination policies within public transportation sectors nationwide, the implications extend far beyond a single city. The D.C. Taxi and Limousine Commission's own internal findings, released after months-long review, were damning. They acknowledged significant systemic failures within their oversight mechanisms. The report cited inadequate driver training, particularly concerning diversity, equity, and inclusion. It highlighted a lax complaint review process that allowed repeat offenders like Miles Corbin to continue operating despite a clear pattern of misconduct. Furthermore, the Commission admitted to a lack of proactive monitoring and enforcement, relying too heavily on passenger complaints rather than implementing preventative measures. The system, they concluded, was reactive rather than protective. In response to these findings and the sustained public pressure, the Commission announced a series of sweeping reforms. These included mandatory, recurring bias training for all licensed taxi and rideshare drivers, developed in collaboration with civil rights organizations. A new, more robust complaint system was introduced, featuring clearer reporting protocols and a dedicated rapid response unit for severe incidents. Real-time GPS monitoring for all cabs was mandated, allowing for objective verification of routes and stops. Finally, a passenger bill of rights was to be prominently displayed in every vehicle, clearly outlining passenger entitlements and driver responsibilities, with contact information for filing complaints. The aim was to foster a culture of respect and accountability, ensuring that no passenger would endure what Dr. Thorne had. The incident involving Dr. Aris Thorne and Miles Corbin was more than just a deplorable act of individual misconduct. It was a glaring spotlight on how unchecked power, fueled by implicit bias, can override basic principles of service, dignity, and respect within public-facing industries. It exposed a systemic vulnerability, a chink in the armor of what should be a safe and equitable service. The fact that a man of Dr. Thorne's stature could be so brazenly dismissed and ejected, simply for asking a legitimate question, underscores a pervasive nature of bias that often sees black individuals, regardless of their achievements, as inherently less credible, less deserving of polite engagement, and more prone to suspicion. The consequences for Miles Corbin were severe and appropriate. The loss of his livelihood, the permanent revocation of his license. For capital city cabs, the financial penalties, the reputational damage, and the mandatory reforms served as a costly lesson in corporate accountability. But the true cost extends beyond dollars and cents. It's measured in the erosion of trust, the perpetuation of fear, and the daily burden carried by those who must constantly brace themselves for the next microaggression, the next unjust dismissal. The challenge now is not just to implement these reforms, but to ensure they are sustained, rigorously enforced, and genuinely transformative. Will the mandatory bias training truly shift attitudes? Will the new complaint systems empower passengers and hold drivers accountable? What changes now, beyond the headlines and the initial outrage? Should there be a national database for all licensed service professionals, from taxi drivers to police officers, that tracks and publicly reports multiple complaints of discrimination and misconduct, allowing consumers and employers to make informed decisions? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. This story is a stark reminder that the fight for dignity, for basic respect, is far from over. It highlights that the struggle for civil rights is not confined to grand marches or legislative battles. It is fought in the everyday spaces we inhabit, in the transactions we make, in the simple act of trying to get home. We're not stopping until every passenger can travel safely and with dignity, until every individual is treated with the respect they deserve, regardless of their skin color, their background, or their status. It's about all of us demanding a system that truly serves everyone.